have 1 hour to develop and pitch an original board game concept. I'm Miriam.
I'm Georgia.
We're Big Crow Games, and we're joined today by my friend and colleague and, let's be honest, boss. It's Tom. Say hi, Tom.
Hello, it's me, Tom, occasional guest.
Friend first, boss second. Occasional guest, occasionally.
Would you mind telling the listener a little bit about yourself and your gaming habits and preferences?
Yes, of course. I play less than I would like now that it is kind of part of my job as owner, founder, and general busybody at Good Time Games Board Game Cafe, which, as you've already implied, you also work. Lucky you.
I am very lucky.
Yeah, I like pretty much all games. There aren't many that I'm just like, no, don't want to play that one, apart from, Monopoly and some of those. But I like big box, scary, intimidating things. I like a co-op game. I enjoy all mechanics, really, as long as they're done well. And yeah, I like I'm a bit of a is this PG podcast? Can I say I'm a bit of an arsehole to play with?
you can say swear words here. Our listener doesn't mind.
Cool. Forgot to ask that one. Yeah, anyway, I'm terrible to play with. I like I like games that let me be annoying and obnoxious. And I like and try really hard to win. And I enjoy that people enjoy beating me when I take games really seriously.
Yeah, I get the feeling that both me and Georgia would probably derive some satisfaction from
absolutely. I'm great fun to beat.
Yeah, I'm really getting that vibe. No, Tom's great. Tom is always a good time, even when he's try-harding. So obviously, as our guest, we asked you to bring the one-word prompt for this episode. And what was the prompt you chose?
Well, I chose bees, because bees are very important. And, we're a Manchester-based podcast and also board games place. So, bees.
Did you have any sort of initial thoughts or springing off points from that theme or that prompt?
Well, there's a lot of games that involve kind of nature and fauna, but bees are interesting animals, and I figure they are they're interesting. I think lots of people know a few things about bees. Mm-hmm. They have a pretty cool sort of color palette about them with the black and yellow,
Mm-hmm. You know what it is.
You know what it is. So yeah, I just figured, a bee is a good starting off point. You could probably go in a lot of different directions, and I figured, we'd probably come up with something interesting with bees.
Well, I was speaking to you at the cafe the other day, and you mentioned some ideas, which I quite like. Me and Georgia are both big fans of like a limited communication game, and you mentioned
Waggle Dancing.
Yeah, there is a board game called Waggle Dance.
That is also what I discovered today as well. Yeah, I saw the Tom Bambuzzle review of it. He liked it, which is interesting. It didn't do anything that I had in mind, I'm not gonna lie.
No. So I don't know how on earth you would do it, but I love the idea of some kind of limited communication game that is themed around or vaguely involves like a dance thing. It kind of made me think of like a sort of a combination of like a bee theme and like a disco theme, like when you're in the club and it's too loud.
I'm in the club all the time.
Oh yeah.
You're at a club night or a music event and it's so loud that you literally, even if you shout in the ear of the person next to you, they're unlikely to like get what you're saying. And maybe maybe bees have got the right idea. Maybe we could be multitasking using our dance moves to communicate in musical environments.
I mean, like, all the so many classics involve kind of charades, miming, monikers being, I think, my personal favorite of that kind of
I really enjoy
genre.
monikers. A party game could be quite fun because one of the things I associate with bees is like swarming or large numbers.
Yeah.
So it could be, we could think about a game for a large number of players.
Yeah, I like the idea of a party game, swarming. I also love a hidden roles game. And I was thinking that if the bees were to have, sorry.
No, I was all I was going to say is that I was thinking about a hidden role possibility as well, because there are a lot of things that there are insects that look like bees but aren't. I was thinking about like wasps and hornets and stuff.
I thought along those lines, and then I thought, like, wouldn't it just be kind of funny if like the kind of natural enemy of the bee in my mind is the bear.
This is true.
I thought that having the bear be the kind of the baddie in a hidden role game would be kind of funny, because they don't look anything like a bee.
you would usually be able to tell.
Earlier. Oh, look at this jumper.
What if a bear, painted itself dark grey and pretended to be a storm cloud? I wanted to mention a thing, because it wouldn't be an episode of Crow Jam if I didn't do some kind of really specific deep cut to me and George's childhood.
Okay, so yeah, you can just tune out for this bit, Tom and listener.
Oh no, I'm keen to hear this.
Georgia, did our paternal grandmother ever entertain you with Beetle Drives?
I have done Beetle Drive, but I did it at Guides. So this is where you're trying to so I think we did it as a fundraiser. It's sort of a game, I guess.
Yeah, barely.
In that you roll dice, and then when you roll a certain number, you get to add a leg to your beetle. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's like the entire object of the exercise is to draw as many complete beetles as you can, and you literally just roll a 6-sided die and get to draw the part that corresponds to the number you roll every time. So it's like if you roll a 4, then you get to draw the abdomen, and 1 is the head, and I can't even remember quite how it goes. Oh yeah, kind of like, I think there's the like antennae, the head, the body, and then maybe each pair of legs is a different number.
Yeah.
I obviously that's not anything, but it did kind of make
both
me
isn't
think... anything
and is also very much something, in that it's a quote unquote game that already exists.
Yeah, it's just, I just thought it made me think about the interesting possibility of trying to re-implement that in a way that would actually make a fun game,
Yeah, no, I totally get you.
I did have another thought.
Yes.
I was also thinking along the lines of kind of if you imagine hungry hippos but bees getting pollen. Except not with a big plastic bee gobbling things, just kind of competing for resources that are in a kind of shared meadow. I was also thinking the bees could be they're sort of forced to navigate along kind of natural pathways. Usually this is one of my bee facts that I sort of researched earlier, and I was thinking maybe it might be possible to come up with some kind of, I don't know, hidden movement game with some kind of hexagonal board thing, or perhaps you're I don't know, raiding a hive. Maybe you're burglar bees, and perhaps I don't know, a bear or something is guarding it. I thought about this kind of maybe if there was an antagonist bear, perhaps there could be a kind of AI controlled thing, like the burglar in not burglar, the guard in Burgle Bros,
Yes.
It kind of just roams around, and meanwhile you're just trying to get your pollen and your nectars.
So sort of semi-facetiously, when I was talking to Miriam about the ideas that I had, I was thinking about how there had been multiple games before with sort of bees involved, and I was like, would it be good to put a restriction on it, like you make a bee game but you're not allowed to use hexagons, or a bee game and you're not allowed to use collecting pollen as an idea.
Well, I thought that would be a given that there'd be hexagons.
Well, yeah, well, my first, because I think this has come up on the pod before, the hexagon is my favorite shape.
Of course.
I consider it to be basically the best shape. So
it's a very satisfying shape. I do want to give a shout out to solitary bees, purely on the basis that, you know, when anyone thinks about bees, they think about like flower bees and honeybees, and but solitary bees are one of our major pollinators. The UK has like 250 species of solitary bees, and they do like a lot of the pollinating, and they're super fascinating. Georgia, do you remember that episode of Spring Watch that we watched at your house with the crazy osmia bee that nests in the snail shell?
What?
I also like, because mason bees are solitary bees and they like dig holes in houses. So yeah, like solitary bees can be really interesting, so I'm quite on board with that.
I don't know how we would make them into a fun game in the same, it doesn't feel quite, I
feel like some ideas are starting to come together for me, and I'm not going to say that this is jamming, this is just me like thinking aloud. The ideas that are really speaking to me are like a party game, a hidden role game, a game with like dancing as part of limited communication. Now, just like completely off the dome with no real thought about this, a game where there are multiple hidden roles but only one person is a real antagonist, so only one person is the bear, lots of people are like colony bees, you know, bees that work together, but then maybe you also have some solitary bees who have some other trait that might make them seem suspicious,
or different wind conditions or something.
Perhaps. And then communication is done just through mime or dancing, and maybe you could also have like a literal pollen collection. Tom before was talking about how bees use their back legs to carry pollen around, so what if pollen was like, you know, in the fuzzies you get all those pom-poms? Everyone has to wear big pockets or Velcro legs.
That really has like Nickelodeon game show vibes.
Here is the board game. It's these trousers. Everyone put on the trousers, the special trousers.
It wouldn't be a big crow game if it didn't basically come in a suitcase.
Yeah, we love to make a really expensively produced, very, very specific game.
I do like a push your luck element too. Completely unrelated to perhaps all of the ideas we have, but I do love that mechanic whenever I see it.
We both to incorporate push your luck. We've done it quite a few times in various ways.
I'm down for this kind of party game vibe. I'm very interested in how dancing could be a form of communication.
Yeah.
And it just to make it seem even more difficult to implement, I was sort of thinking about whether you could introduce like a beetle drive element where you roll a die and like collect the parts of your own body that you're allowed to use when dancing. So it's like, unless you've rolled a 5, you're not allowed to waggle your butt.
I'm afraid that I'm ideologically opposed to anything that tells me when I can or cannot wiggle my butt.
Yes.
We had a dancing game in the cafe, and I don't know where it went, but I remember it was like you had a player flip over a card, and they were coloured for some reason, and players competed and had to do certain moves, and then a player decided who'd done it best. I'm trying to find it because it's going to tick me off, but that is the only game that I can think of that's ever incorporated dance, and I'm pretty sure we got rid of it. But it was a fun kind of staff party game that we just kept around until we got bored of it. What was it called?
I'm super into the idea of dancing being the form of limited communication, or like moving your body. I think like purely from an inclusivity perspective, I'd want it to be like people can do their own interpretations, maybe. Like I'd want it to be equally accessible. I'd want it to be a dancing game that you could play sitting down. Like
it wouldn't necessarily have to be like dancing. We call what the bees do dancing, but really all they're doing is giving directions.
Yes, that's true.
They're just like flower over there, go get it kind of thing. And that could potentially work quite well with hidden roles in a way, because
that's true.
You might be able to be like incentivized to give false information through your role, perhaps.
Should we start the timer? I've also like my mind has just remembered a thing, and I don't know if this is going to go anywhere. Have you got a timer up, Georgia? Should I start one?
I haven't. You start one.
All right, I will get one up. So I remember talking to somebody who I met at like a volunteering gig, and she had gone to like, I guess, a dance school, and they would do all sorts of interesting exercises to get you to kind of like loosen up and not feel self-conscious. And one of these is like they do kind of like everyone does sort of like freeform dance, and then somebody gets selected somehow, and then everybody has to copy what that person's doing. And I guess the person's not necessarily aware. That's something that could be, or like I like the idea of there being everybody dancing at once, and that being somehow the thing that in a hidden role context needs to be like interrogated and interpreted. Does that make sense?
Yes, I totally know what you mean. What this is not exactly what you're talking about, but it's just making me think of it because we were just talking about monikers a little. But you know how in monikers, like within the context of the game is designed to develop a perfect shorthand. So you sort of say it in full, then you say it as one word, and then you do it as a gesture. So what you end up with is a game that has its own unique instance of a language, which wouldn't then be repeatable in another game because it hasn't been built up in the same contextual way. So could we do something where like the movements gain meaning within the context of the game? So you don't start with the movement that means something, but you have to like create the meaning. I don't feel like what I'm saying makes sense, but
no,
I do
it does.
know what I mean.
It does, yeah. I guess you just got to think of it like in the context of there. What would we be directing them to pick out, I guess, is my first thought on that. Like, what would they be? What would they have to, what are you trying to tell people?
Yeah.
Are you picking like, I don't know, colors, shapes? I mean, they're the first thing that pop into my mind if like it's a big grid full of cards or something.
Well, bees use it for directions, so they like tell each other where things are. So you could maybe do kind of like simple map coordinates.
Yeah, or I'm thinking more along the lines of like, Magic Maze, where you've got a character and obviously you're collectively working to get them to a point to grab I think it's like stealing swords and D&D stuff, isn't it? Getting treasure from Maul. But like, I wondered if you had some kind of character, and perhaps if it was placed in an environment that doesn't necessarily have to be a hexagonal map.
But it could be.
It could be. But then that would give you a kind of a reason to be giving directions.
Yes. Okay. Something is definitely starting to form here.
I was going to say, I can kind of imagine, I don't know whether I'm adding to what we're currently talking about, but just as spitballing further, I can kind of imagine a scenario where like it starts off where more or less everybody can kind of see what the information is that is trying to be conveyed through the dance. And then people kind of like drop out of the in circle that actually can see the information. So they're trying to like interpret based on what they learned when they did have access to the knowledge to work it out. Does what I'm saying make sense?
I think so. What about this? Like, this is not what you were saying, but it was sparked by what you were saying. Could it be, so there's still like hidden roles, but they're not excessively complicated. But could it be sort of like a game of telephone? So
Okay.
so there would be one person. Let's imagine, instead of a hex map, let's just imagine a grid map, just for like really for simple purposes. So the first person would know the end goal. There would be one person who knows exactly what square you're trying to get to, and they communicate that to the next person through gestures,
Using a particular limb.
or something like that. So they communicate it in a wordless way to that person, like the number of moves that would need to be made or something. But then that person is only allowed to make the first move, and then they have to communicate to the next person what the next move is. So they've both got what next moves are. So it's kind of like memory and limited communication. But then one person in there is also trying to. The thing is that it just wouldn't work. Like, there is no way you could execute it perfectly, even if no one was trying to sabotage you.
Yeah, I was going to say, if only one person knows what the sort of destination square is in that scenario, it's quite tricky.
I mean, with the, that I keep wanting to call it Mortal Wombats. There's that game where you have
hand wombat.
That's it, yeah. So you've got like a kind of saboteur in your group, but because it's quite tricky anyway, they usually don't have to do too much and can kind of stay sort of hidden. But you could make it a bit of a kind of high stakes thing, like at the end of Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. If the murderers are found, they get the opportunity to kill the witness and win. You could perhaps sort of maybe reverse that, so that the challenge of it, you could probably find a way to balance it. But if they did need to suddenly sabotage, you could make it so it's fairly, I don't know, easy for the team to at least kind of clap back at them. And in the context of bees, maybe the bees would be attacking the bear.
I'm still very keen on the idea that the saboteur is just one bear in a bee costume.
Extra big bee.
Okay. So then the saboteur would be, I guess in the version I'm imagining, everybody would get their turn to dance or like to gesture, and the saboteur could use their turn to try and like misdirect or lead off the path. I wonder if it needs to not actually be like map based or direction based. I think that's the bit where I can't quite see how to implement it in a way that feels party game like and kind of works.
Yeah. So the other way in which it might work in terms of the other type of hidden role game that might work would be something along the lines of Chameleon or Fake Artist Goes to New York, where everyone knows the dance moves except for one person, and they have to kind of fake along in some way.
Similarly, what if the instructions that you were allowed to give were determined by, let's say, draw, like in Secret Hitler, where you draw two and discard one, and one could be a fascist, or one could be. What if the directions that you're allowed to give were determined by kind of a little bit of randomness? That way you could just be giving, and you would generally choose to give the correct direction if you were a good bee. But potentially you could have just got unlucky and drawn 2 cards, neither of which were particularly helpful, or sent you the wrong way or something.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm actually starting to imagine whether, based on what you were just saying, Tom, maybe there's only one, because at the moment we're still talking about the communication as though somebody is being directed. Whereas
I was imagining a token being moved, just so you know, rather than there being a character, rather than one person owning the token, I was seeing a sort of communally owned token being moved.
Yeah, it's just how do I explain what I'm trying to say? Like who owns the information about where the token, are there multiple conditions? Is there is there only one person who's interpreting the directions, or is everybody interpreting the directions? And if so, how do you decide whether they're right or not?
Okay, I think I have a possible suggestion, which would go back to now this is a real throwback. This would go back to the pilot episode of this podcast for Know My Onions.
Okay. Yes.
So you would have like a hex tile map, but then each player secretly hides something under one of the hexes while no one else is looking, and then the saboteur could put something bad there, like a bear. And then you would know where yours was, and you would be trying to help people get to yours or get to yours yourself. And then the saboteur would be trying to steer people towards the bad outcome. And then if you had a large group, you could have 2 saboteurs. Is that anything? And then that would maybe put you back in the position where some people could be solitary bees that have like quirks in how they communicate.
Yeah, a possibly slightly less complex, maybe not less complex, way of achieving the same effect would be to have kind of a code card, like in code names. So that instead of needing to choose where you place your thing, because it would then be possible for like multiple people to have some idea of where the bad things are, but not everybody, if that makes sense.
Are we still keen on there being like a kind of the development of like a shared language where dance moves or certain dance moves refer to going in a certain direction?
If we can do it, I would like it. But if we can't do it, it's not the end of the world.
I think it is possible. I was just thinking, like, so you've got presumably a player at the start that kind of, in the way I was thinking of it previously, there's a player at the start who kind of knows where you need to get to. And I guess that player is going to draw potentially like dance moves that are shown on a card. Now they probably will look at that card and decide in their head perhaps which direction that dance move is going to mean. So they could perhaps have like a little axis like that, and they place a card perhaps in the direction that they want it to mean, and then maybe they perform it, and maybe after every move they sort of give a thumbs up or thumbs down as to whether or not the team has interpreted that move correctly in terms of a direction. Or
I am definitely starting to see something here, because what you would eventually end up with, now I have a question. Would you imagine that you would basically end up with, let's say, 6 cards face up, arranged? You could even have a way of setting them up, arranged so that everyone knows those basically like cardinal directions, so everyone knows what the moves are? Or do you think people should have to try and remember?
Maybe I don't know. I mean, you'd hope that maybe the moves had some kind of directional vibe to them, so maybe that would help them remember.
I think I have a possible suggestion for this. So it goes as you would say, but that maybe maybe before play even starts, 6 dance moves are drawn and arranged in a visible tableau that everyone can see, representing the cardinal directions on the board. And then every time you get some kind of bad outcome, one of them is flipped face down. So everyone is referring to the same dance moves, and you could string together a certain number of moves. So you could do like 2 shimmies and two shimmies and a shake for like two moves in one direction and then one move in a different direction. But you would lose under some circumstances you would lose visibility on one of the moves,
and then the saboteur, if we have one, could be trying to cause those bad outcomes, not even like as a means to an end of the game, but just as a means to like reduce the amount of information people have. And
also they could sort of do their dance moves in a like hard to interpret way, like, was that a shimmy or a boogie?
I like this idea a lot. I was kind of imagining, sorry Tom, you go ahead.
Sorry, I was just thinking like maybe there should be more than one saboteur. Like maybe it should be more like team v team, like a more balanced kind of player count for each side. Because I imagine it would be, if you're just one person, it would be perhaps quite hard to mess it up enough.
Yeah, I think I'm down with that. Like,
I mean, that's one of the things like we quite often say on the podcast, like we don't really know what that balance would look like.
Yeah.
Like we haven't tested it, so we don't know.
Okay.
But I mean, I can definitely see that. I think it would probably be feasible to make it so that one person has a chance of, making a significant impact. But I'm definitely down for teams as well.
How that would work, I suppose, is that the sort of code word style map would be dealt to, so you'd have a set that was shuffled and dealt to every player, where everyone just has some minimal piece of information and the saboteur just knows bad locations. But then how do we... I'm just sort of thinking aloud, like, how do you make it so that people know, like, how do people not find out you're the saboteur before it's time for them to know, basically? Like, if you're the only one who knows the location of bad things.
It could just be that they have to slow you down or something, like maybe only have a certain number of turns. It's kind of anticlimactic, though, that you want the big... sounds like a bit of a damp squib ending.
Yeah, and I definitely want there to be circumstances where you lose access to your move library. Like, I want people to... That's what I think is interesting.
Well, I'm not sure if I have understood your question, Georgia, but I don't think it's necessarily true to say that because somebody had the information about where traps are or whatever, that people would instantly figure them out. Like if the saboteur did dance moves that led players into a trap, it would be easy for people to assume that they were just a good player who didn't know that the trap was there, right?
Yeah. What I mean is, how is it revealed that there is a trap there? I guess.
I mean, I guess you...
So you would set...
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Because in code words, when you make the bad move, the person who knows, it's not suspicious that they know that you've made a bad move, right? Because the 2 players on that
I
side
see what you're saying.
Card.
I guess I was actually, at the end of the day, still imagining the version that you described, where there were like
where people have laid their own traps and rewards.
You could have like a set. So obviously in code names, you've got like a single card, but you could have a set, and maybe that is also your kind of role card. And perhaps the good players get given some information. For example, one of the good players would that might not work so well, but you could have it so maybe all the good players are aware of a single trap, but the bad player is aware of all of the traps.
I was thinking the same thing, because then it would make it tricky to design the game, because you would have to have different sets for different player counts. But then in theory, as soon as we do hit a trap, somebody knows that that's a trap.
Yeah.
In theory, but then you're relying on every player in the game being able to check whether have we hit a trap. Otherwise, it's going to be the bad player.
Yeah, I feel like possibly the most elegant solution is still for everyone to secretly place some good things
and some bad things,
and
just as course of the games.
No, I think there's a decent idea that like that could be something where the idea of there being like solitary bees that don't play by the rules of the sort of average bees but are still good bees might work.
They might also just be aware of, dangers out there in the meadow.
And,
they might need to communicate that.
So okay. So maybe like at the start of play, you would know what your role is and what types of token you're placing underneath map tiles. So maybe like normal bees get 2 like pollen tokens. The bear gets 2 like red tokens, and then the solitary bees might get 1 good, 1 bad. And so you would like draw your roll card, and then while everyone's eyes were closed, you would just follow the instructions on it.
I quite like it when, sorry to add
potential
complexity, but I really like it sometimes, when sometimes you have players that switch teams. I'd quite like to have some kind of trap that did that.
Okay.
So potentially.
Does that mean then that like when you resolve? So this is the thing I was thinking is that like someone gives a set of move instructions and a player, not them, moves the token according to what they think those instructions are. Talking. How do you then once the token is placed, once the move is finished, you lift up the map tile that it's on, which would kind of be like hey, that's my fish type map token. You lift it up and resolve what's underneath. So is that resolution then done blindly, as in everyone else doesn't see?
Oh, that could be fun.
Because
but how would people would still know, right? If it caused us to lose information in the move library.
Yes, that is true. Okay.
It could be that maybe that hidden token switched the allegiance of a player or something.
Oh, they got like cordyceps or something.
Oh no, parasites.
That's turned me into a bear. No, I don't think it has to.
How that would.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That I like the idea of a bee that switches allegiance, but maybe that's just like written into it.
Problematic.
But maybe it doesn't have to happen like because of some kind of random event. Maybe it just happens
based on the number of moves, perhaps.
Yeah, on the number of moves, or So, do you mean the number of moves that have been taken, or the number of moves like visible on the one pool in the move library?
Yeah, it could be the number of visible moves. Like
so, if 2 are lost, then you're switching teams, and now you're bad.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that given this game already involves some element of memory, probably players want to have their own whiteboard note cards where they can actually note down the locations of the things that they placed at the beginning, right? Otherwise, you're not just having to try and remember what the directions are, you're also having to try and remember where even the things are that you know about. in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. So people could be given like, they could just have a whiteboard where they mark it themselves. Alternatively, you could have each of the hexes be unique so that people could remember not like its position, but just which one it was.
Oh, it's
like,
yeah, I think that
it.
makes sense. I was going to say,
nice.
like, it would make life a lot easier if like the map has some, like imagery to it.
Yeah, definitely. I was seeing something quite.
Let's imagine like meadow, forest,
fountain.
Yeah.
Or you could also, alternatively, if you wanted to do kind of an abstract thing, it could be like unique sort of flower shapes and colors or something like that, which would make for something that looked very attractive.
Yeah.
Potentially.
I don't know. So many abstract strategy, bee-related games.
Yeah, fair enough. You're right.
I want it to be
more figurative.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm down with that. No, totally, of course.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, so it would be, like, oh, it was a cool bush with like purple and yellow flowers. And
so just to check what we're currently landing on currently.
Yeah, let's run us through what you think the game is.
So we have a kind of hexagonal map with loads of features, and we've got players who've been given roles potentially being in kind of two teams. The bees and potentially some solitary bees who may switch allegiance are trying to get nectar to feed themselves, and they will do this collaboratively by giving instructions to the next player in a circle or whatever it is. The dance moves correspond to directions for a pawn or bee to move around on the map, and we will each be given a token to place on this map at the start of the game, and our moves will be trying to direct our single bee pawn to the either good tokens or bad hidden tokens.
What you said actually gave me a thought. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. I was just that's about as far as I got.
Depending on number of players, the way you described it made me realize that you would actually necessarily have to have a team. One player actually could have quite a lot of influence because they don't just have the opportunity to give bad directions, they have the opportunity to interpret directions badly. So if there was like 5 players, for example, that person effectively gets the chance to screw up 2 out of 5 turns, because on the turn where they're the person moving the pawn, they can like pretend that they thought the dancer did something different and move the piece wrongly towards a trap or something. And on the turn where they're giving directions, they can give bad directions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense.
So one player, if there was just one saboteur, could still actually be relatively powerful.
Yeah. When placing these tokens, is that like going to be a close your eyes thing, or will we presumably that'll have to be done like in secret at the start?
Yeah, it would be done in secret at the start. How I think I would do it, based on what we described, where everyone has 2 things to place, is everyone does their first thing. So you go around once, and then everyone does their second thing.
Oh, okay.
So, and if you lift up a hexagon and there's something already there, you have to place it there, because you can't have knowledge of 2 things.
Oh, I didn't. Yeah.
Or
maybe you could have knowledge of 2 things, and then you could claim stuff. So if I was a saboteur, I might claim like, oh, I went to put mine in this space, but there was something already there. There was a bad token there, or there was a good token here. I found it. Lucky me.
At the moment, there's no speech. There's no politicking in this.
I'm sticking to no speech. I think no speech is what makes it really exciting. So I'm totally down with you being able to go in, because you would only ever have information about one other thing. So the maximum number of things you would know the position of is 3.
Yeah.
Or
you could have.
Is
You
that
could
true?
technically keep. You could get incredibly lucky and continue turning over.
Yes, and also you could, if you are, so say you're the person who places second, so person 1 places, person 2 picks up, goes where person 2 is, and then on the second round, the same thing happens again, then person 2 would end up knowing where 4 things were. But like, I mean, it all depends on map size for what's going to work, and I think map size probably has to scale with player count.
Yeah, that's quite easily done though. Like Battle Sheep does it really well. You know,
and I think it could be, I was just going to say, I think that could be kind of good because like you'd want quite a big map generally anyway.
Yeah.
I really like this. I just want to say I'm really excited by this. I want to know how you win, which I think is probably by collecting a certain amount of pollen. And I want to know how you lose, because at the moment, turning over the red, there's only going to be 2 red tokens in a game with 1 saboteur, the way I've described it, which means that losing moves wouldn't happen very commonly. So I'm wondering if finding 2 red tokens is a lose, but turning over a tile with nothing underneath it loses you a move.
Ooh, yes, I like this. So maybe there's a special move for like, you know, turn over the tile. As in like your pawn could be moving around, but do we just automatically turn over every tile that you move over? Because that's kind of what I had in my mind initially, but
no, I think it sounds to me like me and Georgia were both imagining you would only ever turn over the sort of last tile that you alight on a turn. And I guess that would mean that each player only gets to direct a certain number of moves.
Yeah, so this was the next question I was going to ask. So imagining a set of directions, like even on a hexagonal arranged board, I think the most number of directions you'd need to communicate to get someone from point A to point B would still be 2. Or no. Yeah, I think that's right. Because if you number them 1 to 6, to get someone from any point on the grid to any other point on the grid, you could do it by moving along one line and then along another. So how the communication would work is that you would do a certain number of moves, and I think we need to know how many moves is the maximum. So say I wanted someone
maximum, it might be really funny to watch someone
just no maximum. So you're just telling someone like, yeah, okay, like
that would be a good strategy as well for the saboteur if they wanted to, you know, confuse. Maybe they could just do a few too many moves.
Yeah.
I definitely, even with like human capacity for speech, I tend to find that if I'm asking directions to somewhere and I'm a decently long way away, I have to stop and ask like 8 people on the way because I forget the multiple steps that I was given. Now, what was I thinking about? Okay, I do feel like we could get away with just having 1 saboteur depending on player number, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't still have solitary bees or like people with slightly different ways that they play. I also kind of want to imagine I don't know how this would be incorporated into gameplay at all, but I just kind of want to imagine that there's a soundboard that plays like little musical bits and stings when someone has to do their dance.
Would it, because I
like
worry
Simon
about
says.
the saboteur in this one, because I think it sounds like they've got a tough job. I wonder if there could be some sort of competing like win, because obviously if Bear gets honey, that's good for Bear. Bear's job is done.
Okay.
But you know, if they're on their own, I think it would be good to have some kind of, or at least maybe a chance at winning if they got that, perhaps. I don't know whether that would make it too much the other way.
What are you describing? Sorry.
Our saboteur within
Mhm.
the bees, our fake bee,
Mhm.
bear in bee costume, whatever we're thinking of.
Mhm.
I worry that, I mean, their wing condition, is it
Oh,
just the other
making
team
people.
failing, or could
Yeah,
we have
I see what you mean.
maybe something quite hard that if they achieve, because that's a more
What if
exciting end.
every move card is turned face down? So rather than the good team finding both your bad tokens, they turn up nothing 6 times.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, like some kind of
Then it's just like the hive was starved out, right?
Yeah,
Like,
and they've just done such a bad job of being a bee.
they've forgotten all their dance moves. If a Is there any way for the hive to recover their dance memory?
Oh, that's a good question. Because the other thing I was going to say is that in theory, if the players are playing well and paying attention, having the card turned face down doesn't lose them that move. They just don't have reference to it. I wasn't thinking that move becomes banned. So like when you've only lost one, probably like people could still figure it out just by knowing which one it is.
Also, which move gets removed as well? Because if it were me, I would obviously try and choose one that I remembered. But of course, not everyone will remember the same thing, so maybe that's a non-issue.
No, I think it should be up to the player that turns over the tile with nothing underneath it, so that if it's the saboteur, they can choose to remove. They get a chance to try and like create an advantage for themselves by confusing people, and conversely, if it's a good bee, they can try and make it easy on everyone by removing a move that they think everyone would remember.
Yeah.
I think it would be quite important to the design of the game that the moves have quite like there are lots of different moves, but the differences between some of them are quite subtle.
Yeah, I like that idea as well. I just had a thought and I'm going to try and say it while I remember what it was. Crap, what was it? Oh no. This is a communication game where we aren't communicating via speech. I don't want to like mess up the simplicity of the game, but is there some way, because people could be paying attention to who's doing what and trying to figure out who the saboteur is there something that the like cooperating players can do either in communication or on the board that would try and like single the saboteur out or cause some setback for the saboteur? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, this is an oversight, I think.
I do see what you're saying, because at the moment, like there's no opportunity for the good players to account for who they think the saboteur is, except for in quite a private way. And that matters for 2 reasons. The first one being that obviously they can't like make decisions based on information. And the second one is, I hadn't thought about this, but the way I was imagining was it was played proceeding in turns, with everyone advising the next player.
Yeah.
Which means that there's only ever one player sort of really getting it screwed over by the saboteur, if there's only one saboteur.
Right.
So I think there's a few things that you could do to fix that. The first one would be to do a like change places and have everyone get up and run around and go buzz, 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 and then sit down in a different chair. So that you're not sitting next to the same person all the time. And then I also wonder if there's like a sort of a bee conference that you have maybe after a full set of like after a full go round, where everyone just does like accusatory pointing.
I really want to I can't, now we're talking about the like trying to single out the saboteur. I can't help but think about the thing that bees do to like kill a wasp that's infiltrated, where they all like
they like
Huddle
crowd
around.
around it and try and
Overheat
boil
them.
it.
yeah.
Okay, well, so you could have this maybe takes away some of the elegance of it all being done through dance, but everyone could have a suspicion token that they crowd around the player. And if someone ends up with a certain number of suspicion tokens, maybe they're like persistent. What if you can just throw a suspicion token on someone at any time?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone's just got a little store of them, and when someone gives a bad direction or seems to interpret a dance move sort of willfully wrong, you just throw a suspicion token on them.
I actually
it's a public move.
That as like, it might make the game a little bit more nasty feeling than it is at the moment, but I actually quite like that as a mechanic. Like, this is the survival for the hive. Like, they've got to be vigilant and
so what would happen then if you got, let's say, all of the suspicion tokens placed in front of you?
I think there would be a fairly low limit for suspicion tokens. It would be enough that the saboteur couldn't just like do it to you. So maybe it would be like 3, but maybe once you've got 3, someone being pushed out of a game is always kind of boring and sad. So something else happens.
Put a limit on how many, maybe each suspicion token you have reduces. I know we've said there's no maximum moves, but if there was a maximum number of moves, then suspicion tokens could reduce the number of moves you're allowed to make on when you're doing your directing turn.
Yeah, I like that. But then alternative, like that could backfire. If you know what I mean.
Do you think a player would be able, so let's say our dancer gave 6 directions, they did a lot of dancing, but you are suspicious that they are the saboteur. Presumably you wouldn't have to follow those directions. There's no obligation to.
There's no obligation to, but
precisely because you wouldn't necessarily have even communicated them right in the first place, so no one could say you were breaking the rules by not doing exactly what they intended.
But you could also signal that you weren't doing exactly what they intended by maybe like watching their dancing, then doing a suspicion token, and then doing what you think is right. But obviously, like intentionally choosing not to follow someone's directions is also suspicious.
Yeah.
But that's good, right? Like that's something that we're kind of on board with. We want to create more question marks. Like every bad communication, like as in a communication with a bad outcome for the good team, could be the result of someone giving bad information or the result of someone following that information badly. And there might be good reasons to do either.
So just check I'm sort of on track thinking we've got like a number of different objectives for the, I'm going to call them the good team, for the good team to meet in order to win currently, right? There's going to be probably 1 or maybe 2 per player or something like that.
Sorry, could you just get a little bit closer to your microphone, Tom?
Sorry, there you go.
Thanks.
Yeah, so there's several objectives to meet, and then I'm thinking that there probably need to be maybe a timer or something. Because a timer might sort of work to create more error.
Yeah, that's true.
That time pressure might be quite helpful, perhaps.
Speaking of timer, 20 minutes on the clock. Okay, neat. That is loads of time. So in terms of objectives, Tom, just my thinking was simply that there is a number X that represents a winning quantity of pollen collected.
Yeah.
So there is only sort of one objective, that being collect pollen, but obviously there's lots and lots of locations where it would be. So you have to sort of steer your bee successfully to 5 pollens in order to win before the bear can get you to 2 bad tokens, or you lose all your moves.
Would the bees have to? Do you think it would be good if they had to identify the saboteur?
This was the other thing I was thinking. I know I said it's sad and boring if a player gets removed from the game, but maybe there's like at a set number of suspicion tokens, you have to reveal your role. And if you're a good bee, if a good bee is revealed, then the saboteur wins. You know, Among Us rules, basically.
Yeah.
Like if a good bee is revealed, then the bad guys win. And if a bear is revealed, then the good guys win.
I always liked, do you know in Dead of Winter, when your traitorous person is revealed, I like that the game continues and just changes. Like they suddenly just start rummaging round the pharmacy bins or something.
Yeah,
it could be that maybe if they were revealed, perhaps a bear token got placed on the board and it became like a race to get to something. I don't know.
Yeah, okay. So then that pet player just takes control of the bear, and maybe they,
together with the solitary bee,
they
form a separate team.
So through some sort of limited set of moves, they have to catch up with the bee token and just like get that bee. I quite like that. I think with 20 minutes left on the clock, I'm going to say it, I think we've got a game. I don't think we need to do a whole lot more. I'd love to talk about what it looks like. I'd love to talk about what it's called, but I'm going to try and do a quick recap of what I think we have. And if I forget anything, please, either of you just jump in.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a hidden role, limited communication party game. I would say this is probably for minimum 5 players. The board, like the play surface, is made up of a grid of hex tiles, which are each unique. They each have a unique upper face so that people can easily identify them. And they're laid out in quite a big grid. I would expect for a 5-player game, you would probably want maybe 50, maybe even more laid out. Then going round one at a time with every other player blinded, the players place tokens underneath the hexes. They hide tokens underneath the hexes. And depending on their hidden role, they will hide different colors of token. We'll call them green and red for good and bad. The bear, who's the bad player, hides 2 red tokens. The regular bees hide 2 green tokens, and solitary bees hide 1 green and 1 red.
I have a component suggestion just on that point, or like possibly a mechanics suggestion. I guess it doesn't make much of a functional difference, but instead of people having tokens that they need to hide underneath, what if setting up the map works kind of like Battle Sheet, where people just take it in turns to place a hexagon into the map? Everyone starts with the same kind of like matching
shape,
set of hexagons on the top side, and the saboteur is decided by just the person who has the bad things on the underneath side, and you're just taking it in turns to place a hexagon. So not only are you deciding where to place your, like, it's what I'm saying, making sense? Like you go around the table placing hexagons, and you can, as a good player, like you can choose when and where you're placing the ones that have pollen underneath. As the bad player, you can choose when and where you're placing ones that have bad tokens underneath.
The only small issue, I guess, is that if they were dished out randomly, then the bad player might also get some of the good hexagon
I guess I was kind of imagining
a
Spyfall type thing where you have like determined sets of.
I really like that too.
I like that as well, especially because if you're hiding tokens under tiles, like you would need some way of making sure that it wasn't extremely obvious which tiles had something underneath them. So I like that. So they're double-sided. So when you say like on the upper surface, would every player have a set of tiles that
look the same?
You
look the same as
give,
everyone else's, or look the same as their own?
you could give the bad player like one tile, like just give everybody their tile with the good thing, including the bad player. That would also give them a kind of bluff as well.
Mhm.
And then the bad player would be given the tile with the, I guess it'd have to have the 2 bad spaces on it. I'm imagining like, 4 or 5 hexagons. So they could be on, quite close together.
Yeah.
But then they would have a good tile to put down and a bad tile, and then presumably some filler tiles based on the number of players. And
yeah, I was actually imagining individual hexagon tiles, or like
too.
Or just like ones that are like 2 stuck together, maybe not like full sections. So in answer to your question, Georgia, I wasn't imagining like one player would have all the grass tiles and one player would have all the, because then it would be immediately obvious
it would become trivial. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. So I was imagining each person has like one of each.
Each person has an identical set of unique tiles.
Yeah.
Everyone has the same upper faces, but each upper face would.
see.
So they would all like from the upper side, everyone's tiles would be interchangeable, but there is a bad guy set. So they would have to be identifiable on their opposite sides. Anyway, that all makes sense. Okay.
Sorry.
So you set up the play surface, then a single like bee-shaped meeple, a beeple, is placed in the middle edge, placed at a starting position, and players take it in turns to maneuver that bee by communicating to their neighboring player through dance how to do it. Now, how this happens is that we have a hexagonal move library of face-up cards that show dance moves that correspond with cardinal directions on the board. And those moves can be taken away through like a set of circumstances. So play proceeds as follows. Player 1 turns to player 2 and does a series of moves that player 2 then interprets by moving the bee in the directions and number of spaces communicated by the moves. Once they have completed that, they flip the tile that the bee ends up on and either collect pollen, collect a bad token, or if they find nothing underneath, they lose one of the moves from the move library. It's turned face down, so people will find it harder to remember. Then player 2 turns to player 3, repeats the process. Play proceeds in this manner until, at any time a player can put a suspicion token on another player, and if a player gains 3 suspicion tokens, they have to reveal their role. If it's bad player, the good players win. If it's good player, then the bad player wins, I think. Otherwise, other ways the good team can win is to find a set number of pollen, and they could lose by finding 2 bad tokens or losing access to all the moves in their move library.
And there's like a shuffle seating.
Yes, there's a shuffle seating thing. So at the end of a round of moves, everyone gets up, does a waggle dance, and then sits back down in a different seat or next to a different person.
I like that there's still sort of an element of like hidden role stuff in that, in that the saboteur could try and seat themselves in an optimal position to
to hide their sabotage-ism. I also like that you could have multiple saboteurs, although I think it would have to be with like a reasonably large number of players. Yeah.
That sounds correct to me.
When a bad tile is revealed, are we still saying there's 2 bad tiles, or is there just 1 where it's like game over?
Can you get back up in your microphone again, please, Tom?
Sorry, yeah.
I feel like 2 is better, because in part because it's possible to find them by accident, and in part because it creates a bit more tension where suddenly like there's a lot more riding on it. It could even be more interesting for it to be 3.
I agree.
What you don't want is, like it would be perfectly possible on the very first move of the game for the good team to lose, and that just seems a little Like, you want them to be able to avoid that by skill rather than blundering into it by bad luck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine a situation where presumably three votes for the baddie and they're done, you know. But like
Yeah.
to be able to direct the group towards three, I guess it depends on the size of the board and things like that. But I worry that also when you flip it over, if these are your unique kind of colors as well, that like it might reveal who the baddie is.
That's true. So they couldn't be uniquely coloured on the opposite side.
I think if it was more like team v team, then having three would be doable. But if it's majority good, then I reckon even like a single,
thing is that
maybe two.
as we've currently described it, the solitary bees also get to place.
Oh yeah.
So there would be more to find than just two.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay, cool. Back on board. I get you.
Because like one of the things that could happen is that like through a completely unfortunate set of circumstances, like two good players could absolutely screw themselves on the first move of the game. Yeah. So that seems a little.
Are we still saying that the solitary bee places some bad tokens, but they're on the good team until a certain number of dances have disappeared?
I don't know if we've if you like that, then we keep that. So anyone who's playing a solitary species of bee, I think there could be multiple things. So like a mason bee might place a red token but never change allegiance. So they create a hazard, but they know to try and avoid it, but that might result in them behaving suspiciously.
I like that too.
But then you could also have, like some kind of digging bee there's like a type of bee that mimics something. So that could be a bee that switches allegiance when a certain number of moves has gone.
You could have a bee that perhaps gets to flip over a tile at random at the start of their turn, and maybe there's no penalty if they flip over a red tile. That just means that there's one less red tile in the game.
But then maybe they get there's something that kind of balances that out. Yeah, I think this is the kind of thing that playtesting and balancing would be all about. But basically, I like the idea that there might be I'll tell you what I don't like about that though, Tom, and that's that it stops
it totally
it being
reveals.
It's not a hidden role.
That's true.
Something of a revealed role. But it could be a bee that maybe gets to cancel out the effect of something. So
just chiming in as timekeeper.
Okay.
Fewer than 8 minutes.
Okay, it's time to think about what this game is called and what it looks like.
Cool.
I want it. I think it's got quite a traditional look to it. I was imagining, the upper surfaces of the tiles being fairly illustrated. I was imagining a little wooden bee token.
Mm-hmm.
I was imagining the dance move cards. Actually, that was something I had more of an idea of looking something like
sort of stick men. Yeah, this. I can't for the life of me remember the game, but it had stick men doing certain dances.
Obviously they'd be stick bees.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Oh, look at that little stick bee doing his funky seaweed dance.
So
yeah,
I'm sort of
I feel like it needs to be alliterative. All the best games are alliterative. we got Buzz and Boogie. We got beat. That is also dance related word beginning with B. Buzz and beats. Buzz and boogies. I know. I think the deception hidden role part might want to be highlighted in the title as well, perhaps.
That's true. Buzz and beats and bears.
I only ever say during the name coming up with part. That's my only contribution during the name brainstorm.
I quite like Buzz and Boogie. Or Boogie Buzz. Are there any words that kind of begin with a B and like imply deception? This is the heavy portion.
Back stabbing.
Oh.
Backstab, yeah.
Buzz, Boogie, and Backstab. That's more like a tagline. Like, okay, but what if it's like a different? So we don't alliterate with B for the title. So like, it's.
What about Boogie Bambuzzle or?
Boogie Bambuzzle.
Something.
I like Bambuzzle.
Bambuzzle.
Like, I was gonna do a barefaced lying pun.
Barefaced betrayal.
Yeah, Boogie Bambuzzle, the game of barefaced betrayal.
Nice.
Okay, we got it.
Nailed it.
Boogie Bambuzzle. This sounds like a children's entertainer. Like a magician that might come. I'm sure there was a magician called Mr. Bambuzzle or something who did the kids party rounds when I was like 7 in the North Wales area.
Ours deep cut was called Mr. Sunshine, and he purported to come from the sun.
Is that the name of the guy
you all
who was
believed
always
him
at the Onion Fair?
That was Billy Busker.
Yeah, there we go, Billy Busker.
Local legend. Yeah, Mr. Bim Bamboozle he was called. Shout out to Mr. Bim Bamboozle if you're listening.
Yeah. It's hard for me to, because I've seen plenty of bee themed games, it's hard for me to not imagine those illustrations. I wanted to imagine this as something kind of distinct, but yeah, there's Hive Mind, there's Honey Buzz, there's Waggle Dance, and it's all kind of
this
like
is quite different from any of those though.
No, it's just sort of illustration wise, like.
Can we focus on some of the lore of the bear as well, by the way? I want his character, I want his motivation to be fully fleshed out if possible.
His motivation is want honey, but maybe it's want acceptance.
Just wants to be a bee.
Just wants to be.
Okay, the bear is hungry, and this is a hungry bear that probably has dependents.
Yeah.
We don't want the bear to be a baddie necessarily.
No.
Okay, so
sneaky.
Miriam, just coming back to your idea about the illustration and not wanting it to be too much like other games, now that it doesn't matter about all the cards being unique, we could do something that was a lot more in keeping with how I'd sort of drawn the dance cards, kind of that like stick figure-y, sketchy, maybe like 2 colors kind of thing, so that the cards look somewhat like that, obviously a bit better. And
no, I like that. Not better, exactly like that.
Maybe the tiles look kind of similar, so they would have like this one's got a hive on it, but it's literally just like a line art kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, Tom talked about like a diverse meadow, and I do really love the like aesthetic of that. I don't know, it's just I've seen I'm just saying, like, as a board game person, I've seen plenty of cartoon bees in my life.
Okay, so it's not cartoon bees.
What about sort of
photorealistic?
Kind of, if it took the
closer to your mic, Tom.
Sort of, how things matching up.
Yeah. Okay. So
yeah.
So like it's very modular, but everything kind of aligns in a way. I mean, that might make it look a bit kind of abstract strategy, which I know I said I didn't want, but
I think your mic actually might have come unplugged if you're using one. You're
You went very quiet for a second there.
Are you there?
Hello?
Yeah, that's better.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I mean, with the upper faces of the tiles not really having any significance to gameplay, they absolutely could just link up in kind of vaguely interesting ways, just like here and there. Or they could be Yeah, I like the idea of a diverse meadow, but just maybe not done in that kind of, not done in too board gamey of a style, I guess.
Seen or heard of Dwarf Romantic? Always
No.
like the aesthetic of that. It's a video game and soon to be board game. It's not a board game yet, so it's not copying.
No, I think we might be running out of time. Okay, I'm calling it there. We maybe don't have the aesthetic completely, but we have the name, and I am so proud of the tagline that I think it's actually maybe some of our best work ever. Bare-faced bee-trayal.
I noticed the bee-trayal. I like that. Was a nice touch. Touch. Just quickly, the dances.
Yes.
Any names for the dances? Because I thought of
like
the honey dip.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we didn't think about dance names.
Or the bebop. Maybe the
Yes.
bebop.
Love that.
I think that is. I think that's a must-have. So like each of the move cards would also have the name on there, which might sort of aid with memory, but because you're not allowed to talk out loud, that could. Now, I know that this would turn it back into a game that came in a suitcase, but it comes with enough pairs of dealy boppers for every player to wear them.
And a full bee costume for everyone as well. Why not?
Just a full bee costume for the bear.
Plays 10, so it's a suitcase full of 10 bee costumes.
The hidden role. All right, well, I think this has been an absolute blast. I think we've come up with something really fun. It's quite cool to like have a party game that's still got like, I don't know, there's something about it still having some quite sort of trad components that I quite like.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still really want to imagine that you like press a soundboard button to get you like it anytime you have to dance, you have to do it to some.
The Kickstarter edition is going to have to come with some kind of soundboard.
Yeah, definitely. Or just a companion app.
Yeah, that's doable.
Well, Tom, it's been an absolute blast having you on the pod.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to it for some time, so I'm glad we were able to do it.
Yay. Thank you so much. I really like this game, particularly its whole aesthetic, and I've just been having a ton of fun imagining people having to stand up around the cafe tables and do silly dances. This was great. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, listener, for tuning in.
We love you, listener.
Thanks, listener.
And come back again in 2 weeks' time for more Crow Jam.
Yes.